So thanks guys for attending today's session on the supply chain for new age brands. What we have here is, along with me, we have Vishal, who is founder of Gyanoveda. It's an interesting new age brand in the Ayurveda space. And we also have Harsh, founder of WareIQ, building a new age solution on the warehousing side. And I also have Vinay, partner at Fireside, been in FMCG brand building and investing space for a long period of time now. And my colleague Naman from Stellaris. So,
and of course, Rahul, yourself, you spend enough time building consumer internet brands over the last 2 decades. So who better than you with the vantage point of what's happening now?
Thanks, Vinay. Thank you. So maybe if we can, maybe Vishal and Harsh, if you can spend like 2 minutes talking about your business, what you guys are building, and then we jump into questions that are more specific to the supply chain side for both your companies. That will be very useful.
Sure. Harsh, over to you. I think I'll let you go first.
Sure. So great. Hi, everyone. So I'm Harsh, founder and CEO of WareIQ. We are building an e-commerce fulfillment platform for direct-to-consumer brands in India, which allows them to offer fast shipping services, which is same-day delivery, next delivery in 40 hours. The way we are able to do that is through our network of fulfillment centers, which are pan-India. And we have a tech platform which connects to all of these fulfillment centers. It connects to various channels a brand sells on, be it their own website or various marketplaces. And we also connect to multiple last mile courier partners, which includes both pan-India shipping companies and also the hyperlocal players. So the way our model works is when we work with a brand, our platform determines which are the location which makes sense in the unique context of the brand to store their inventory and how much inventory they should be storing in these different locations so that they don't also increase their inventory capital, but at the same point, they're able to stock most of their inventory in close proximity to their demand center. And then as and when the order comes in, we route it to the nearest warehouse and ship it to the end customer. So that's our model. We are about 2 years in the market. Last year, we were part of Y Combinator. And currently, we work with about 150 different direct-to-consumer brands across the spectrum. So yeah, that's a bit about us.
Harsh, and we also, are almost there to when it comes to working with you. And I think you're solving a critical problem for any D2C brand like us. So what Gyanoveda really does is it solves the world's biggest problem when it comes to the women health space, and which is the period abnormalities. You talk about PCOS, you talk about irregular periods, and since we are all men, in the room, I think I will just expand that a little bit. But I think these two are predominantly a global problem that affects close to 800 million people in 162 countries. The way we solve this problem is by 3 things. At the center, at the core is content, which explains what is the reason why this problem happens and how can you solve it. The second piece is the solution itself, which is Ayurveda. I think Ayurveda has ultimate solution when it comes to solving lifestyle disorder, and any period problem is all about lifestyle disorder. And the third piece is technology. How do I go directly to the consumer? I think technology has made that possible today. The whole content rides on technology. We have a period test which helps a woman anywhere in the world answer 10 questions, and she's able to instantly get a result of what is the problem that she's facing. And finally, the supply chain. I think while there is a last mile delivery that a courier boy takes care of, but I think the whole stack is, the D2C stack is built on technology. So yeah, I think Gyanoveda is all about solving period problems. And, so far in the last 18 months, we have gone from 0 customers to 100,000 customers in over 18,000 pin codes. Almost 90% of our business, 93% of our business comes straight through. There is no assistance provided. People see the video, they go to our website, and they buy the product. That's how technology is really helping us in reaching directly to the consumer.
Amazing.
Thanks so much for Vishal, taking the time, Harsh and Vishal.
Pleasure.
Please go ahead, Rahul.
I was going to ask a very basic question from Vishal that, you know, from nothing to such a large size now, if you can, and then, you know, most of the investors look at top line margins and all, we don't, maybe a lot of us don't even appreciate the back end of fulfilling that business. If you can tell us through your journey of what technology solutions do you have when you started, you used, and what are the solutions you use today to make sure your supply chain works smoothly?
Yeah, so when we started, Rahul, we started with our own warehouse, which was a 200 square feet warehouse, and we were shipping out just 10 products, 20 orders a day. And obviously no aggregator, no courier partner was willing to talk to us. We had to rely on the local courier partners. You know. But in the last 1 year, what I have seen is this supply chain stack has massively evolved. So we now have completely outsourced our inventory, storage, and in turn logistics piece, which is, you know, reaching it to the last mile. And the way I'm looking at, you know, supply chain now is from the manufacturer, the product goes directly to a warehouse, and there are over 25, 30, 40 different locations where this warehouse are located. Once it reaches the warehouse, there is a technology layer, and there are two predominant companies in the warehouse, which is providing the technology layer. The first layer is input that inventory into a tool like a Unicommerce or Easy Ecom, so that the warehouse boy clearly knows where the inventory is located. Then there is a layer above that, which is the logistics aggregator. And just to name a few, like we are using iThink, we are also using Vamaship, we are connected now with WhereIQ. So there are you know, multiple aggregators that pipes into the first layer, which I said, which is Unicommerce or you know, Easy Ecom. So so below that, there is a layer which is Shopify. We use Shopify. So when the order comes, the order gets pushed to Unicommerce or Easy Ecom. Easy Ecom or Unicommerce push that data to WhereIQ or any of those aggregators, which is iThink or Vamaship. And these aggregators are further aggregating the logistics company like a Delivery, Easy Ecom, ExpressB, Shadowfax, multiple, you know, courier partners that eventually do the last mile delivery. So yeah, I think this is like a 5-stack layer, which is, it begins with Shopify, which acts as a point of sale. Then there's an inventory management tool. Then there is a logistics aggregator. And then finally, there is a logistics partner.
Got it. And Harsh, if you can, you know, warehousing,
yeah,
partial warehousing, leased warehousing, these physical manifestation of how do you store inventory and ship inventory has been around for a long period of time. What is so special about consumer brand that, you know, you're building WhereIQ, as in you mentioned, it is for these brands and all, right? So how are these requirements any different than a regular, you know, warehousing solution that any e-commerce player might need?
Yeah. So the one critical part of it is the consumer expectations, which is driving the need for modern supply chain solutions, which WhereIQ is also part of. And that expectation is to get the delivery same day, next day, or within 48 hours. So that's the consumer expectation, where if you have an online brand and you're dealing and the order is getting too much of delay, it's getting delivered on 4th day or 5th day or longer, customers have an option to go to Amazon Prime and get it delivered to them fairly quickly. Either your own brand, which is on Amazon, or something similar, which is offering fast shipping services. So it has become mainstream. So supply chain is not just the background function, it is something what is driving the consumer expectation. Now, if you have to offer fast shipping services, and for a geography like India, which is very complex, so there is a tier one, if you look at the tier one cities, which is one of the core demand centers, NCR is polar opposite of Bangalore, Kolkata is polar opposite of Mumbai, and there is tier one, tier two cities which are spread all over. You cannot have a single distribution point and offer fast shipping services pan India. So when we work with a lot of brands which are in their early journey, so as Vishal was explaining that he started with a 200 square feet warehouse and he set up his operations, a lot of brands even now start something like that. And when they start hitting the scale, they realize that, okay, say a brand started in NCR and they have a very controlled timelines in and around the catchment of NCR, say Rajasthan, Haryana, Punjab, when they start getting South as a very core demand center, West India picks up, and then a lot of them run into a situation where say 60-70% of their orders are in 5 days or more. Now, how do you solve for that shipping with a central distribution point? That's when warehousing comes into picture, where you have to distribute and get closer to your demand centers. And from a technology stack perspective, I think that is the first point of it. First is a brand needs to know where they should be storing their inventory. And no two brands may have a similar supply chain design. A brand may have a very strong recall in south of India and they don't really have that demand pan India. So for them, just a warehouse in Bangalore makes sense. But as they start scaling up and you see that say even Northeast is a big demand center for you, need to have a distribution point in Guwahati. If a tier 2 city or MP and adjoining area, you need to have it in North. So one part of it is from a technology stack perspective, understanding how many distribution point makes sense for you. Could be just 3 or could be 4 in your unique context. And the second part of the decision is because your inventory is limited, it's not infinite inventory that you can keep everywhere. You need to know that what is the right amount for say inventory cover of 30 days or 15 days in each of these warehouses that you should ideally be keeping. So that's the first prediction and the intelligence part of it that you need in your technology stack. Then the subsequent layers comes in where once you distribute the goods to these warehouses, then you need a very efficient technology solution from a warehousing management perspective, which again is the pick and pack operation, which is primarily going to be used by the staff in the warehouse, not necessarily by the founder of a D2C startup. They need an intelligence layer to have basic hygiene, that what's my inventory level at any point in time. If there is any stock order, I need to be updated on that. And any of those insights on the inventory front, on the order management front, how many orders on Amazon, Flipkart, my own website, what's the status of it, and then the last mile of it. Who is managing my parcel? Is it delivery or a Blue Dart, FedEx? How many are returned? And the nuances around it, where some of them may be fraud if it is a COD, and the workflow around the shipping. And then there's a post shipping workflow also. So that's a layer of it, but it starts with the intelligence and then the subsequent stacks on warehousing front, order management, and then the shipping and post shipping workflow comes in. So that's how I kind of look at it.
So quick housekeeping announcement. And anybody has any questions, you can put it in the Q&A box and we'll try and cover most of them as we go along. Harsh, just to double click on that. So your technology basically docks into both inventory management, which could be Unicommerce, Brown Tape, or any one of these, and on the other side with aggregators as well as direct delivery APIs as well. Is that the way to think about it?
Yeah, so that's the starting point. So for example, for a lot of the D2C brands who are on BearIQ platform, if you go to their website and put in your zip code, you will be able to see the transparent timelines that place your order before 2 p.m. today and get it delivered by tomorrow 9 p.m. or so. The reason we are able to do that is we are able to talk to inventory management systems and see that this SKU is available in which warehouse. So it could be multiple warehouses. And then you need to talk to the shipping management systems and figure out that among the various courier partner option available in that from and to pin code combination, what is the TAT? So as a system, we integrate to all of this. And from an end customer standpoint, they really need when they are working with BearIQ, they don't need to worry about what's in the warehousing, what's the WMS system, what's the courier aggregation pieces. We kind of optimize for the operational SLAs. There are primarily 2 SLAs that any client or a founder of a D2C startup or a head of supply chain for a prominent company would look at. That's cost per order, and second is shipping timeline. And if you optimize for those, then the subsequent KPIs, say returns percentages, cancellation, top line conversion, repeat purchase, everything's like a bifurcation of these 2 parameters. So we kind of optimize for these 2, and all the it's a fairly complex technology stacks. And finally, founders they ideally should not be focusing on supply chain. They have a lot of bigger problems to solve for. So that's what we solve. And from an operations perspective, from a technology, it's completely what we do grounds up.
So before WhereIQ, founders would typically, integrate with a Shiprocket, a Vamaship, or any one of these individual delivery APIs to manage their last mile delivery. You're saying in the post WhereIQ world, that's not there anymore. Just integrate WhereIQ and forget about logistics post warehouse.
Yeah, so essentially, let's just take example of a D2C founder headquartered in Gurgaon, and they start seeing demand in Bangalore, and they need to open up a center. Essentially, you will be talking to three players in the value chain. One is an infrastructure company. You need to rent out a space. You need to set up your infrastructure. You need pick and pack stuff. You need to have that people and infra ready. So there you would be talking to a typical warehousing company in that region. So that's one. Second is you need to talk to a WMS company so that you are able to have access to that inventory. The staff there can run the operations, and then you need access to a last mile, and it could directly come from a courier itself, or you can work directly with the aggregator. There are pros and cons of both of them. So these are the three players in the value chain. And again, there are also players who operate in the post shipping workflow management piece of it. Control tower operations, you need to have a very premium tracking experiences, and post-shipping workflow management of RTO, NDR, etc. So primarily three players in the value chain. When we come into picture, our brands don't need to talk to three different stakeholders. Just like how when you work with an Amazon warehouse, you send your inventory to Amazon warehouse, they spread it out across their network, and they send you a monthly bill that this much amount you stored and this much amount you be processed, and this is the bill corresponding to it. You don't need to worry about what is the tech stack or what is the operations and what the setup. They kind of live up to those SLAs. So we are kind of building an equivalent system outside of Amazon's ecosystem, but fairly horizontal platform.
I mean, sorry, Rahul, maybe one last follow-up question to Vishal actually. So the real value of a distributed warehouse will come once you distribute your inventory in various locations, at least zonal wise, etc. So two kind of nested questions there. One is, at what point of time in the startup's evolution does one start evaluating, where you have to distribute the inventory, in which locations? Should it be class A SKUs, class B SKUs? At what point of time do you go from one warehouse to multiple warehouses? That's one question. And the second one is, as you're analyzing all of this information from a brand standpoint, from your startup standpoint, what are the key KPIs that you are measuring, in terms of logistics, in terms of what's happening in city, in state, in top tier one towns, in tier two towns, in maybe some far-flung areas like the Northeast or J&K? What are the key KPIs that you measure to satisfy yourself that, hey, my logistics partner or my warehousing partner is doing the right thing for my consumer?
Yeah. So I'll answer the second question first. When it comes to measuring the success metric, I think before that, even before I address, in the last 18 months, we have fulfilled 100,000 orders. And within Gynoveda, I have only one person who manages supply chain. Now, this is possible only because the kind of solution that WhereIQ and alike solutions offer us. Supply chain is not my core capability as a D2C brand. And I can say that the kind of solution that is today available in the market has taken off that load from a D2C founder and put it in the right hands, because that's where it belongs to, which is WhereIQ's business. That's the core business, right? So I think I would like to address that first, that today, D2C founders have a technology stack and the last mile delivery stack that they can 100% rely on. And there is a solution available out there. And it can be completely outsourced, and within the company, there can only be one person who's managing the whole piece from a relationship standpoint. The second piece that I need is, now that I have only one person, I need measurable metrics and visibility of what's happening to my 100,000 orders. And 100,000 orders is a very small scale as compared to the kind of large brands that we're talking here. So the dashboard that we have internally developed, we're calling it a logistic pulse. That logistic pulse comes to me in my mailbox, automated by using a Google BigQuery and various API connectors, and it gets triggered in my mailbox as a cron job through an email. What I'm looking at every day in the morning when I wake up at 8 o'clock is what was the speed of delivery over the yesterday and over the last 30 days and 30 days to 60 days. Am I improving on my speed of delivery? And internally, we are following the metric along with the partners like WhereIQ that 70% of my delivery need to happen within 3 days or less. So that's the number one metric that I'm measuring. Obviously, same day delivery is the most desired, but 70% of the orders get delivered within less than 3 days. The second metric that is super critical to track is RTO percentage. And the way we have distributed RTO percentage as a measurement is we don't look at we distribute that as RTO for prepaid and RTO for COD. Because when you decouple that is when the real picture emerges. RTO for prepaid is as low as 1%, whereas RTO for COD can range from anywhere between 10% to 35% based on the product category. So that's the second critical metric that I'm looking at. The third critical metric that I'm looking at is the speed of delivery for RTO orders. How quickly that those orders come back to my warehouse and ready for it to be shipped back again. So that's the third metric because that's again a cost for me. And these three metrics, when I'm closely looking at, honestly, it becomes very simple for me to run the business because these are pressure points in the business when it comes to consumer experience. When it comes to, so I think that answers the second question, Vinay, is what metrics are we looking at? When it comes to the fulfillment piece, what we understood from the speed of delivery standpoint is one, you need to have enough inventory. That's a very, very obvious thing. Second, if 30% of my orders are coming from Northeast and we get orders from 50 such pin codes where for 20 kilometers, the courier boy has to travel to just deliver one packet, which is a pin code like 79111, which is at the border of India. Now, if my warehouse and inventory is stored in Mumbai, fundamentally, it is not possible for me to meet the timeline of 2-day delivery. If my next order is supposed to be delivered in Jammu and Kashmir, my next order is supposed to be delivered in Kerala, and so on. There are certain pin codes in the country, and I would put that in the 30% bucket, where if I'm going to ship this order from Mumbai warehouse location, then it is practically impossible for me to meet my promise to the consumer. And of course, time to deliver and the speed of delivery clearly impacts how a consumer looks at the brand and the trust factor of the brand. And that is where the need for distributed storage arises, where I would want to store 30% of my inventory because my orders come from Northeast. Maybe I would want to store it in Kolkata or Guwahati if it is coming from up remote part of east of India. In case if I'm getting another 40% of my orders from, say, Chandigarh, Punjab, Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, then I wouldn't want to dispatch that order from Mumbai. I would rather dispatch it from a warehouse location in Delhi. So yeah, I think that's the key part. And RTO has a direct impact on the speed of delivery has a direct impact on RTO. If I ordered today and you are delivering to me after 8 days just because the dispatch happened from Mumbai, obviously there is a high chance we have seen where the RTO really happens.
It's always a trade-off, right? I mean, there is the working capital question here, where if you have to replicate your inventory in a Guwahati or a Delhi or wherever else, or Punjab, you have to incur a higher inventory holding cost. And obviously, Harsh will be very happy. But on the other hand, investors might be a little unhappy saying, that the working capital has gone up, but it hasn't impacted in equivalent sales going up. So where do you, how do you kind of balance that trade-off?
Good question, Vinay. In fact, we discussed this internally, with my team. And my perspective on this is there is a second reason why I would want to have a distributed inventory storage, which is to de-risk my business. This is a risk mitigation plan, which means if I have 100% of my inventory stored in Mumbai warehouse, obviously I'm running a high risk from a business continuity standpoint. The second point I would like to make is, even if I distribute my inventory, say in 3 different locations, which is Mumbai, Delhi, and Guwahati, nothing stops me from shipping the same inventory, which is sitting in Guwahati, to say, for example, Jammu and Kashmir, or even to Kerala. Because the whole technology stack really does not see this as कि Guwahati का जो inventory है वो सिर्फ North East में ही जाएगा. If I run low on my inventory in, say, Mumbai, or maybe I've gone out of stock in Mumbai, I still have 2 more locations from where I can actually ship anywhere in India. So if I'm holding for 30 days, 100 units of goods, what I'm essentially doing is, instead of putting it at 1 location, I'm putting it at 3 different locations, which is 30, 30, 30.
Yeah. When I just want to interject on this point. So other part is that you will have different regions and your SKU velocity will be drastically different in different regions. So suppose you have Northeast as a distribution point where you start with Guwahati. The SKU velocity is say 1/10 of what you have in NCR. So consequently, your stock cover for 30 days is also 1/10 of, could some plus and minus, but you're not equally storing the inventory in all these different locations. So that's also like one bit of optimization our platform allows to do. But there is ROI factor of it, which we have seen founders really look at it, that if you have a distribution point in one of those regions, the repeat purchase and consequently experience that kind of jumps up significantly for that region, where prior to that you had a subpar shipping experience where, say, getting parcel delivered in 5 days or 6 days. So in that cohort of customers, the repeat purchase was not that high. A lot of customers bought first time from your website and they just forgot about it in the parcel delivered to them in, say, 6-7 days. They would not buy it the next time. And then you had a local distribution point, they bought it for the first time, got delivered in 48 hours. They kind of, for that cohort, the repeat purchase is higher. And for most of these brands, the cost of acquisitions that they are looking at these days, the ROI of it comes up when there is a subsequent repeat, and then you cover for that cost of acquisition does not happen in the first purchase. So supply chain is kind of powering the business case of D2C altogether and making that economics work. So again, the inventory cost is a very important factor. So we have to get that prediction right. And essentially, as also Vishal mentioned, so it's like very important. So that's the starting of the game itself. If you get the prediction incorrect, and if a stock in Bangalore, you cannot do it 40 hours delivery for Northeast. You need to have that prediction right, but at the same point, so as a company, you do not get happy if you are like in multiple locations with us, because your business case would not work out, and then you'll have to disintegrate few of the nodes. So our panel kind of provides very focused insight that, say, 4 distribution point does not make sense at your scale. 3 is pretty good, 80% pin code. In this timeline, you are fairly okay. 4th, you'll probably be burning more money. The cost does not pay off for the upside of it. So we kind of work out on those pieces also.
Have you seen significant visible jump in the demand if you go with that kind of a distributed warehouse approach, or if you're able to deliver next day delivery or less than 2-day delivery? Is there any visible jump, or is it just helping you with the RTO and maybe improving customer experience, but not so much in demand?
Naman, the delight factors in business are becoming a hygiene factor now. So there was a time when same-day delivery was a delight factor. Today, that has become a customer expectation. So which means if I'm delivering in 3 days, it is not a delight factor. Yeah, so it is considered to be a slow delivery. So I think the expectation of the consumer is changing. Like the way, Harsh just very, politely mentioned that somewhere in the conversation that, and I'm facing this as a challenge, that consumer has 2 choices. If I have already subscribed to Prime on Amazon, I know that the delivery will happen in same day. So even if I have an existing customer for which I delivered the product when he or she bought for the first time, and I delivered in 5 days. When she knows that I'm a prime customer, she will say, hey, मेरे को तो ये product वैसे भी खरीदना है, और same price है, so let me buy it from Amazon, because any which ways I'll get it the same day, because in our case, continuity of the medication is very important. There cannot be a gap in the middle. So now in this case, I ended up actually paying Amazon for something which I could have easily fulfilled on my website. So yeah, I think two factors coming out very clearly here is, I think speed of delivery is now becoming a hygiene and not a delight factor. You're expected to deliver within 1 or 2 or 3 days. When it comes to the demand piece, I think, look, for the kind of brand that we are, I can talk for myself, the kind of product that we have, any which ways the consumer, if she has to buy, she will buy. But then I might end up losing my captive audience who could have bought on my website to Amazon or Flipkart.
There is a question, maybe Harsh, if you can answer, that a couple of people have asked, that if you look at next level, there are frozen goods, there are perishable goods, there are high value goods, let's say, I don't know, mobile phones or electronic devices. And then there are goods which are, let's say, in beauty, personal care, where perishability is not a challenge. It can be stocked, it can be reused much easily. And then there are fashion kind of goods, which are, at return point, sometimes they are not even usable. What are the nuances of the backend supply chain that changes by these different categories of products?
Yeah. So that's a good question, because the supply chain design also varies a lot by these different product categories. As a company, we haven't been into the perishable goods right now. So that's a choice we made, because that's a completely different supply chain. So we didn't really got into that. But then the design of, say, big basket distribution model would be more in line with the requirement of the category, where vegetables, fruits, and say cakes and bakeries, the products needs to be delivered the same day. And typically the model is more of a dark store based distribution model, where there is a very large FC which is in the outskirts of the city, which stores everything, and then there is analytics and intelligence which provides the prediction that for these different dark stores which are in urban catchments, how much inventory should be kept, because these urban dark stores are not for storage. These are for fast out of processing and shipping it out. And the distribution of it and the density of orders in these different catchments make the complete unit economics and the viability of it. For the other categories, largely the supply chain is the traditional e-commerce supply chain, where there is a large scale FC. And in that FC, there is some bit of nuances. For example, there's a high value good. So you need to invest in security and security cameras and ensure there is no pilferage anywhere, and taking a special care on some of the products which are prone to any damage and they are brittle in nature. So you have to invest in that. For certain categories like beauty and cosmetics, so that's like one of our bigger segments that we work with. There are certain products like, say, lipsticks, and where you require it to be in an AC room, where else they start melting in room temperature. So that's where you need to invest in some of that. We work with a lot of mattress companies. So for them, the storage is fairly different, and the process are very different. But yeah, we kind of design it, demarcate different areas, and ensure that things are being taken care of. Again, in these certain categories, even in non-perishables, there are some really premium brands who are offering same-day delivery. So for them, you need to kind of set up urban dark stores, which you have been doing for a few metros. And again, somebody in the value chain has to eat the cost. Customers does not want to pay for because that's not shipping is not something anyone wants to pay for. So you need to kind of work that piece out. And typically per kilometer pricing of same day delivery makes the cost fairly high as compared to a traditional courier model, where you just pay on a weight basis, it picks up and delivers it in a bulk. So for same day delivery, this only way to economically deliver them is to get the distance shorter. And we are kind of building those cases. So our immediate goal as a company is to get the same day delivery for some of the categories that we work with at the price point of a typical zone A shipping of a standard courier. And we have been able to achieve that in Delhi right now with our dark store that we set up in Dwarka. So it's able to cover Delhi, Gurgaon, and certain catchments in Noida and Greater Noida in our typical zone A shipping prices. So at the same price where you would have got it delivered next day or 40 hours, you're getting delivered the same day just through our supply chain design. And we are getting that slowly working for other two catchments. But yeah, to answer the question, yeah, definitely there is a perishable and non-perishable is like a very broad segmentation. And within the non-perishable, the categories that we work with, there are nuances that we need to kind of work upon.
Avinash has asked a question. What are the advantages or disadvantages to work either directly with a courier partner versus working with a logistics aggregator? So I think maybe Vishal would be in a right position to answer it without a bias.
Sure. I think the way I look at this is, I would definitely go with the, and we have happened to visit this question time and again every month, every second month. But looking at the kind of challenges that we have gone through during COVID times, I think it taught us a lesson. In spite of having 10 to 12 courier partners who all of them promise 27,000 pin code coverage. It is not, what we have seen with experience is because of the challenge that we have gone through where delivery boys are there or not there with the courier partner, the ability to deliver consistently across 27,000 pin codes is not there. So which means a courier partner number one, and I don't want to take a name, otherwise, it will feel as if, favoring one against the other. So courier partner number one may say 27,000 pin codes, but may be great at 18,000 pin codes and may not be good at the balance 9,000. Whereas a courier partner number B is also good at 16,000 pin codes. In that 16,000 pin codes, there are those 8,000 pin codes which courier partner number one is not covering up. And so the story goes on. So essentially right now what we are seeing is we are doing load distribution, an intelligent load distribution, which means, courier partner one does a great job at north of India, and courier partner number two does a great job at northeast, and courier partner number three does a great job with Kerala. Now, if you want to work with the goal in mind that I want to deliver within 2 days of order, then in that case, it is better to go with the aggregator that has the pipe connected to 10 courier partners so that you can do the load distribution based on the speed of delivery.
Yeah, Naman, I'll just add to that. So we also work with as a company, we also work with a lot of enterprise business who like to work directly with the courier partners instead of an aggregator, because these relationships are very deep, and the rate advantage disappears at a certain scale where aggregator or them directly also are almost at the same price point. So as a company, we still retain the advantage which Vishal talked about. So there are some enterprise businesses who would plug in their account directly onto our platform. And there are few for backup options, they would say use our existing courier options. So essentially, they still retain the advantage that for certain pin codes, their preferred courier partner where they have their own account is getting assigned. And they know for a fact that say certain pin codes in say Northeast or certain region where they're not as good, where some backup courier options, which are again integrated to our solution, they get assigned. So in that model, we are acting as an aggregator for a percentage, not as an aggregator for a certain base. So still from a platform perspective, we still remain neutral and without any bias on that.
There is an interesting question somebody had asked earlier, which is, end of the day, a lot of experiences defined by the last mile delivery guy, the pickup boy. Any ideas on or any thoughts on, as a brand, what control or how do I control that experience, either by delivering or picking up?
I think if you're talking as a brand, there is a there is a report that we receive called NDR report from the aggregator or your courier partner.
Mm-hmm.
And let's look at NDR is non-delivery report. So in case of RTO, we get a comment and which says, why the courier was not delivered. On the other side, we get queries in our call center by way of chat or email, where if the courier delivery experience and the touch point was not right, then in that case, that hits us back as a brand, as a complaint, and which we take it back to the courier partner. And I would say that constitutes only 1% of the total orders delivered. It is like a बिजली कंपनी. जब तक आपके घर में बिजली आ रही है कोई कंप्लेंट नहीं है. जिस दिन बिजली चली जाती है उस दिन सारी कंप्लेंट बिजली कंपनी को जाती है. Right? So I think that's how this fundamental works. So I would say so far as the complaints are limited to 1%, that's good.
But you are able to link it that accurately, Vishal, that this
100%.
came because of that particular courier partner?
100%, because there is no reason why a girl in our case would take the effort to open her phone, unlock it, initiate a chat. I feel in today's world, nobody really cares about talking to or chatting with a brand unless it is a compelling reason.
Understood. Interesting. There's another question again, I think from Avinash, around what are good technology platforms to get live visibility of order on ship to stack. So saying is aware of Vinkalam, Unicommerce. Are these best of the worlds? Are there other technology platforms that you have seen?
I think VeraIQ is pretty good.
Great. There lies the answer.
All right, Harsh, you have already got a converted customer now. I'm coming there. But yeah, I think if I have to answer that question, we have developed our own system to get a custom report. And we have developed that by way of data automation, by getting data from multiple sources, which is multiple APIs. And yeah, it's not that difficult to develop, but that's us because we were not satisfied with what we were getting. I still need to try VeraIQ for that. And maybe for all you know, it gets replaced.
Got it. And as earlier, I think when I was saying audience should feel free to raise their hands if they want to ask questions, they can also type in. I think there's one more question from Deepthi. I don't know if it links to supply chain per se, but the notion of selling on marketplace versus selling on your website. There's always a balancing act, if I can call it. How as a brand you take a call, because there is one place where all the customers are anyways there, which is let's say an Amazon or a Flipkart. Yeah. And then your own website, which you have to get customers to.
So Deepthi, I'll answer that question with a use case. Say, for example, you see an ad of Gynoveda on Facebook, it pops up as a discovery. You like the proposition from Gynoveda. You still don't know what this brand is, but you like the product. I think today the consumer's first response is, let me go and check out if this product is available on Amazon. And she goes on Amazon and types Gynoveda, and the product pops up. Now, in case if my product, first of all, is not available there, I have lost that sale. Second is the reputation. Oh, these guys are not available on Amazon. Are these guys really reliable? Are they trustworthy? Are their products good? Because if they're not available on Amazon, then maybe they are a fly-by-night operator. So there are a lot of doubts that crop into consumers' mind. The second use case, which is an extension to this journey, is the consumer is saying, यार पहली बार खरीद रही हूँ, एक काम करती हूँ यार Amazon से खरीद लेती हूँ, कम से कम प्रोडक्ट नहीं भी आया तो मेरे पैसे वापस आ जाएंगे, right? So first time purchase, if she's not convinced, she's more comfortable buying Amazon. And then the second purchase, if she likes the product, she may or may not come back on my website. So I have no control over that because I do not get the data from Amazon. But what we have seen is, and in my system, that will still be considered as a first-time purchase if she comes and buys again on my system. So yes, there is a push and pull when it comes to getting that sale on my website versus Amazon. But today I cannot afford to not be there where the consumer is looking out for me.
I think since we're talking about marketplaces, one more question that we have is that does distributed warehousing or keeping your inventory at multiple locations also helps you in winning at marketplaces in some way? Like, is it true, or there's no impact at all when it comes to marketplace orders?
Harsh, you want to take that? You want me to take that?
Yeah, so I can take a shot at it. So essentially, if I talk about my own consumer behavior, when I'm doing a generic search on Amazon, I take the prime tag on, or I see which are the ones can get delivered to me faster. So if you are shipping from Gurgaon only, and then I'm looking at the product from Bangalore, it's probably in a much farther page. It's not in my search results. So that's like the first part of it where your business gets impacted. So you need to be closer so that Amazon can also, it's like function of many things. Speed is also one of the important factor. If you have a slow speed, it moves to page 6 or 7. So that's an important factor.
If I have to take a shot at this, Naman, when you're buying the product on Amazon, say for a Gynovida or any other brand, you have the option of saying shipping by seller or shipping by Amazon, right? So what we have seen lately in the last, especially when the lockdowns were much tighter, is our deliveries via Amazon was slower than the deliveries via WhereIQ and contemporaries of WhereIQ. So you cannot really afford to not have backup plans.
Harsh, there are a couple of questions for you. One is, what is the difference between a 3PL and a WhereIQ? Do you offer a forecasting tool, and do you help brands integrate their supply chain with the vendors also?
Okay, yeah. So I'll take a shot at the first question. So from a end customer standpoint, so seller being the customer for us, so we would act like a third-party logistics player. But I'll talk about the benefits and how do we differentiate to them as compared to a traditional third-party logistics company, which is one is fulfillment and second is the last mile. So one is on the business model itself. So brands, they don't need to kind of lock in any capital to start with us. So if you have to start something in NCR or Mumbai or in all of these locations together, typically with a third-party logistics player, there are minimums. You need to commit to a certain space or a volume to start your business in a certain node. In our case, you can use us like just a compute infrastructure, just add in one node or multiple nodes. If it does not work out in a business case, you can just disintegrate that. So that is one. Secondly, from a technology perspective, since we are a horizontal platform with no affiliation, you get integrations to multiple last mile courier partner and different applications and services on top of it, which can help you manage your returns effectively, a flag of any fraud orders because of COD. So these are from a technology platform perspective, there's a huge differentiation. And second is on the business model perspective, why the brands that we work with chose us versus traditional third-party logistics player. Yeah. The second question I
forecasting tool. Is there a forecasting tool as part of your stack?
Yeah. So the forecasting tool is essentially one, I'm assuming it is on the inventory forecasting, that how much inventory you should be keeping in which location. So that's there. So that's the first part of the decision any brand needs to make. So we are at the middle of August. Brands are thinking that in month of September, how much inventory they should be keeping in based on the stocks that are going to receive from a manufacturer at the month end. So that is like the first inventory forecasting that you require. The second forecasting I'm assuming is on the timeline, like Prime does, that if you order it before 2 p.m. today, get it delivered either by Monday or Tuesday. So that's a forecasting that we do right on the product page, landing page. So we have both the tools there.
And then the last question, maybe Vishal, you can also chip in. What about technology to integrate with your vendors? As in, all we have talked about is warehousing to forward shipping. First of all, does WhereIQ provide anything out there? And Vishal, if you can also chip in with what have you guys implemented any tech stack?
Yes, I'm unable to recollect the name. We use one of the tools there where on both the sides, that means there is a process where, say for example, I've ordered the bottles for the pills that need to be filled. If the bottle gets dispatched from a bottle manufacturer to say the third party manufacturer who's developing these products for us, when the delivery happens, it has to be inputted that I have received the delivery of that packaging material. And when the person, which is my manufacturer, is dispatching those goods from his manufacturing unit to the warehouse, he needs to punch in saying that the goods are dispatched and it's in transit. So we are using a tool for that. I'm sorry, I'm not able to recollect the name for that. It's an ERP tool and it's a fabulous tool, in managing the workflows. I think the question is more around the quality of the goods and what is the technology used to control the quality. I think number one is, before we onboard any manufacturer, there is a site visit. And I at least personally visit that manufacturer and make sure that does he have the right kind of process and system. And I come from a Six Sigma background where I've implemented certain Six Sigma projects. So I look at the systems and processes that they follow at the ground level to ensure the input quality and the output quality. And I have seen some amazing state-of-art machinery being used at the ground level where the human intervention is very limited. And right from the time when the herbs of Ayurveda are put to the time when the pill really comes out, a lot of it is managed by the machinery, which is driven by technology. Like a simple example, if there are 120 pills that needs to go in the bottle, there is a technology used where the machine automatically drops only 120 bottles, not even a single more, not even a single less, right? So we surveyed that and so on. So I think that's the kind of machinery used. Second piece, which is my personal opinion, in India, how much ever technology you implement, right? Agar value system acha nahi hai, supplier ka, right? Then no technology can save you from quality control, right? So I think ईमान अच्छा होना चाहिए, आपको माल चोखा मिलेगा.
Interesting. Jili, Pragya had a question, and either of you and anybody on this panel has an answer, which is around, are there aggregator or courier partners for perishable foods? Are you aware of, there are few last mile delivery guys we are starting to see. People are building these dark stores on a third party basis, where the main logic is 2-hour delivery, 1-hour delivery. But I don't know if you guys have seen any Vinay and Aman that are very perishable food focused.
Not that anything comes to top of my mind. It still is a very broken supply chain. So for example, raw pressery had a very short shelf life and they had to build their own logistics supply chain. Similarly, ID Fresh, Rahul, you must be quite aware of this, that they have built a very differentiated hub and spoke model for their different distribution. They have a 3 to 5 day shelf life as well. So yeah, I mean, that is a seriously broken supply chain.
Yeah.
Not seen too many players there.
Yeah, so there are a few hyperlocal players in different cities, and they would do like a gel pack based delivery to get that thing delivered. Oh, by the way, Raw Pressery is also one of our clients. So we started fulfilling for them, and for metros, we're using some of those hyperlocal partners for faster shipping service. The difference is on the gel pack and some of the some products that would require that.
One more question I think few people have is, who's the owner of the inventory sitting in these warehouses, both from whose book it is on and who's responsible if something goes wrong with that inventory?
Okay, yeah. So in the model with WareIQ, it is we are an additional place for business. So we are a fulfillment partner, and it is the brand who's the seller on record. So just like how you would say use Amazon on an FBA basis, where you're the seller on record, and then Amazon is a fulfillment services. So yeah, that's how it works. And then there is prod insurance, which takes care of any untoward incident.
Got it.
Hi, Harsh, I already see some inquiries pouring in for you.
Yeah, I think there's somebody asking beverage with a 4-month shelf life. I'm assuming that is possible given that you do raw brasserie also.
Yeah, we do it. So we have done for products with shelf life also 45 days. It does require a lot of upkeep and operations right, for us, but at this point we don't say no much.
And there's one more question that came today morning, which is on international operations. I don't know, Harsh, if you guys ship outside India, and Vishal also, if your brand goes outside India, then are there similar solutions available for international shipping?
So we recently signed up a US-based marketplace called OneQuince. So their entire market is in the US, and the supplier base is largely in India and Vietnam. So we are the fulfillment partner for India. So there are multiple suppliers in different geographies. They would send the inventory to our warehouses in different geographies. We process it and use one of the international partners to ship it out. And again, we also, for a lot of the brands which we work in, say luxury, cosmetics, etc., they have a international demand. That's still a very small portion of our business right now. But with FedEx or a DHL integration, we ship it out right now. But from a fulfillment distribution standpoint, we are not there yet. But we, as that business case works out, we can look at that. At this point, it's processing in India and then shipping it out through some of those players. And speed is fairly great of DHL and FedEx in getting them to some of the global demand centers.
Interesting. And do you also take care of customs and all that stuff, or that the brand has to take care of?
Yeah, so custom clearance, duties, and taxes, at this point, we don't look into it. That is something on a case-by-case basis. Even FedEx and DHL have a support system on that one.
Got it.
I think when we shopped around, Rahul, our experiences by and large, what Harsh is explaining, I think shipping within India is at a very mature state now. Shipping from India to global destinations, I think requires maturity.
Vishal, just one last question from my side. Really curious to know, how do you manage your supply chain with one person? I wanted to understand, how do you structure your supply chain and ops team? But since you only have one person, then there's no point asking the structure. But like, any insights on how do you really manage? What are the roles and responsibilities of that person? Like profile of that person for other brands? How can they efficiently manage with lesser manpower their supply chain?
Sorry, I'll use a little jargonish term here. I use a methodology called DMAC, which is defined in Six Sigma, which is define your problem, measure the problem, analyze the problem, improve and control. So that I've been using for the last 15 years, where we clearly defined that what is its delivery speed that we want and what is the metric that we are tracking, which is speed of delivery, RTO outward and RTO inward. So when the 5 top metrics are clearly defined, the expectation is very clear from what I want from VeriQ or alike partners. Then I think from logistics partner or the supply chain partner standpoint, their systems are very evolved. So far as my expectation is very clear, I think the person on my side is only working with the relationship partner, relationship point of contact of supply chain touch points. And he's very clear what he wants from those partners. So I think the issue of outsourcing really comes when your expectations from your partner is not clear and the dashboards are not clearly defined. So that's why in the beginning of the conversation, I said 8 a.m. morning, I get Logistic Pulse, and it's a snapshot, which if I'm not able to make sense out while I'm driving in 3 seconds, that means the dashboard is useless. And that is what has helped us stay on top of the supply chain issues.
Interesting. Maybe Harsh, my last question is to you. There is certain solution we provide, but where does the future lie on the supply chain? As in, what are 3 other interesting things that you think you would like to do next year or so to add to the solution that you already have?
Yeah. So at least the way we look at it, there are a lot of brands who still have their core of their orders coming in from tier 1s, which are top 7-8 cities in India. where over period of last 2 years, we have built up a fulfillment network to have a very fast controls supply chain KPIs in these regions. What I see as a long term, there are many million plus population agglomerates in India outside of metros, where there is a huge appetite for e-commerce demands and all these new consumer brands across the different categories. So getting to them fast with your centers in NCR and Bangalore would not be possible. And you need to be fairly quick to them, given that the road transport and the limitations of the physical infrastructure are still going to be there. It's not going to go away in a fairly quick period of time. So how do you solve for those? And there is again some very good examples of how complex geography like China has been able to achieve it, where players like JD.com and Alibaba, they're able to deliver 90% of their parcels in 24 hours. And again, they also have the impulse plus agglomerates across different mainland. So there is some learnings that we can build on it. But yeah, overall, I think for next few years, 48 hours is like a realistic targets for all the important pin codes, key demand centers in India in the next few years, and then slowly pushing the boundaries and getting it to 24 hours at some point in time.
And if I were to ask the reverse question to you, Vishal, what's your wish list from these aggregators and warehouse, tech providers? What do you want as a brand owner over the next 2-3 years to see in terms of improvement in their service levels or the infrastructure?
I think one of the challenge that we are seeing, Vinay, is when I look at the non-delivery report today, and I'm saying near-term challenge, is that the report comes to me and says that the customer refused to take the parcel. What we have a process internally is, as soon as we get that report, within a few minutes, we call up the customer and we find out what really happened. And what we are increasingly find in 70 to 80% of the cases where the report was wrong, actually, where the delivery was not even attempted. So I think the number one challenge is wrong tagging of the RTO. The reason why that courier boy did not really opt to go to the last mile is because it's a difficult location to reach, or maybe the end of the day and I don't want to reach, and so on. So I think there is some technology layer required there, whether it could be an SMS, OTP confirmation, or some location confirmation, where did the delivery boy truly attempt? Today, I'm not able to, I'm breaking my head on that for the last 3 to 4 months, because my RTO has really come very close to operating at 10-12%. I can bring it down to 5%. And what's really stopping me is that non-erroneous report. So number one piece is the last mile true status on why the RTO really happened. The second piece I would say is I spent about 2 months in developing a custom report for myself to meet my DMAC world-class requirement of how I want to see the report. I would love to, share that report with my, supply chain partners, and maybe make that as an industry standard, because that's really helped me as a person at the helm of operations to keep an eye on that. So otherwise, that report keeps breaking down and I have to keep fixing it. So reporting is another piece that I would want it to evolve. Yeah, so I think that's 2 things that immediately comes to my mind.
I think you have some candidates who want that report of yours. And I hope Harsh is collaborating with you on the report as well. The only advice I'll give is please don't read the report while driving.
Yeah.
That is true. Great, guys. Thanks a ton for your time and sharing your insights. Super useful for most of us and all of us on the attendee session. Both Vishal and Harsh, thanks for taking time and joining us here.
Thanks everyone for joining as well.
Thank you for having us on the panel. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Harsh. Thanks, Vishal. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend, guys. Bye.
You too, guys.
Thank you all. Take care.